Welcome to the Emerald City Sportscast, hosted by longtime Northwest sports journalist Dan Vienne. News, analysis, and opinions from Dan and his guests on the Mariners, Seahawks, Kraken, and more. And now, here's your host, Dan Vienne.
So how was that, everybody? That was a lot of fun. Let's not use ESPN then to look at stats because they got the live videos that play. Thanks for joining me today. I am Dan Vienne. This is the Emerald City Sportscast, and we're going to do something new this year, at least for the road games. Home games I'll be at, so it's kind of hard to get back home in time to do these quick reaction videos. But I thought this game certainly had a lot of meaning. It's an understatement, right? Not just first game of the year, not just a road opener, but we've talked at length about the brutal early season schedule, right? 2 of the first 6 at home. Colts, Titans, Vikings. We'll see how they do. That game's in overtime against the Bengals behind me as we speak, which hopefully will benefit me in fantasy football. I got Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook today. Neither's really had that great of a game, and I'm getting per usual. But we talked about the early season schedule, how tough it is, how important it is to get off to a good start, or at least I talked the other day in the last episode about at least go 3-2, right? Colts, Titans, Vikings, 49ers, Rams. At least go 3-2, and then the schedule shifts in your favor. Little bit easier teams, more home games. 4 out of 6 at one point at home, 2 out of the last 3 at home. So get off to a good start. Anything better than 3-2, and then the national people are going to start talking about you as a contender. Just want to give some quick thoughts because this game was so important. And I think the biggest things that we wanted to see, what's the defense going to look like with that rebuilt, not really rebuilt pass rush. They kind of brought back the core from last year, added to it. How were some of the young guys that are being entrusted with more responsibility this year perform? How would some of the camp stories carry over into the regular season? Because it happens every year. Hey, he's having a great camp. Oh, he's having a great camp. He's tearing it up in camp. And then it wouldn't carry over into the regular season. So I'll give you my thoughts on that. But the biggest thing, and where we're going to start with and finish with, is what did the offense look like? This is what we talked about the other day, right? Shane Waldron's first time calling plays in a regular season game as an offensive coordinator. Had only done it in the preseason with the Rams under Sean McVay, and obviously this season for the Seahawks. What would it look like? Would it be all window dressing? Would it still be a Pete Carroll offense, conservative, overly careful, predictable? Or would it look more like what Shane Waldron kind of learned from Sean McVay and sort of that Rams offense, or a combination of the two, as we've heard? What would some of the new players look like? Gerald Everett, D. Eskridge. How would the running game look? How would that offensive line perform? And most importantly of all, how would Russell Wilson play? And how ingrained is he in this new system? And how well would he execute? Early returns, pretty damn good. Seahawks beat the Colts today 28-16. They had a 21-10 lead at halftime. No score in the third quarter. And then they scored again in the fourth quarter. Beautiful throw to DK Metcalf to kind of wrap it all up. Wilson looked great. I want to go back to the beginning of the game, though. My initial thoughts are this. First 2 drives of the game told us a lot about Shane Waldron, his philosophy, his feel for calling a game, how he was going to use his personnel, and most importantly, how Russ was going to adapt to it. Because all the talk about rhythm passing, quicker passing, more diversity in the offense, more movement, more motion, all that goes out the window if the part of Russell Wilson's game that gets him in trouble sometimes where he holds onto the ball too long, looking for the home run on every play. Not every play, but more often than not, when he should just take what the defense gives him, move the ball down the field. Those first two drives, what did they look like? They looked like a Pete Carroll offense on steroids. And what I mean by that is Pete wants to run the football. He wants to set the tone physically. People get that wrong. His critics who say that he runs to a fault think that it's because he's conservative. He wants to be safe. He wants to dictate the physical part of the football game, wear teams down, get you into the fourth quarter with a chance to win, even against a good opponent. We saw a physical running game, right? First play of Shane Waldron's career, runs it to Chris Carson, pitch outside. I like that. You don't see a lot of that over the years. Carson was really good today. He was physical. He was tough. He ran for, let me pull it up here, 16 carries, 91 yards. He had a long of 33. Didn't get in the end zone. Didn't really have any opportunities. But he was dictating the physical nature of this football game. He was sending a message. He was running hard. He looked strong. It's everything we love about the toll that's going to take on his body over the year, right? So Chris Carson was great. And the offense looked suited to him. He ran inside, ran outside, he broke a lot of tackles, of course. He laid some guys out, put his shoulder down. He did put the ball on the ground once. It was on the replay. It was a great early save. I think it was his first carry of the second half. Darius Leonard came out, punched the ball out. It was a great play by Leonard. You know, Carson looked like he had the ball protected. It was just a heck of a play by Leonard. Another clue is to Waldron's mentality, though. First play of the next drive gives it right back to Chris Carson. I think it was a 7 or 8 yard game. Really strong game from him. They threw it to him a couple times. There's one play in the third quarter I like where Russ faked it to Carson on the play action and then threw it to him in the flat. Love seeing stuff like that. What we didn't see today, and now jury's out and we're going to have to see it develop, is who's running back too, because you can't, only 16 carries today, but you have to manage Carson's workload and try and preserve him for the entire 17-game season. They gave the ball to Rashad Penny early a couple times, 2 carries for 8 yards. He looked quick and decisive and physical. And then he hurt his calf again. That's what he was on the injury list earlier in the week for on a limited basis. But it just brings you back. And I tweeted it. I've been as patient with Penny as anyone. I've been as understanding with Penny as anyone about the pick in the first place and the logic of it when everybody was up in arms. The talent's there, but I'm about where I was now with CJ Prosise. I'm just, if they were to sign Geno Atkins this week, it's a possibility, and they need a roster spot, I'm fine with moving on from Rashad Penny. I really am. Whether you can get anything for him in trade, I don't know. Just cut your losses. He was a first-round draft pick. He was a bust. He's a waste. Fine. Just cut your losses, because what we saw from Alex Collins in the preseason was outstanding. And I think the perfect complement as a guy to run in tandem with Carson. He's a healthy scratch today because they had Penny as running back too. And then you have Homer for special teams, DJ Dallas as well, and his ability to catch the football. So, you know, Dallas got a couple carries late when this game was comfortably in hand. You know, we'll see how severe the injury is. What worries me when you continue to hear calf is what? Achilles. So I'm kind of done with it. And it's because I don't think we need him. I want to see Alex Collins elevated to running back 2 next week. And I think that really give the Seahawks a potent 1-2 punch with Dallas as a guy who can spell those guys as well. What else do we see from the Waldron offense? Really spread the ball around. I thought the run-pass balance, haven't gone through the play sheet. That'll be really interesting. It felt like there weren't any parts of the game where they got stuck in a rut running it too much or where they got a little overly aggressive throwing the football too much. So I like that. Lot of balance. I mean, what do we have as a team? Let's see. 18, 23, some live math, 25. So by my quick math, 27 rushes and Russ threw the ball 23 times. I don't think that's going to be typical. I think there will be plenty of games where Russ throws it more than 23 times. That's pretty close to a 50-50 split. And then Russ had a couple of runs himself too. I like the decision-making we saw from Russ today. It was 18 out of 23. For a guy playing his first game under the new offense, and we didn't see him at all in the preseason, he looked decisive. He really did. When he made a decision where to go with the football, he unleashed it. The last touchdown to Metcalf was a great example. He's in the pocket, made a quick read, put a lot of steam on that ball. Metcalf had a couple catches today too. Real good hands catches away from his body that tells me he might have been working on that part of the game, had some drops last year. We didn't see DK, didn't even see a target for him until the second half. That was another question that I had about Waldron. How would he disperse the touches? How would he use his personnel? And without a lot of volume today, I thought it was cool. I thought he went out of his way to get Eskridge involved, to get Swain involved, to throw to the running backs. We saw Will Dissly catch. Did he catch 2 balls? Dissly, 3 catches, 22. Lockett had 4, Metcalf had 4. Lockett, 2 long touchdowns today. And the bomb to Lockett in the second half, if I recall the sequence, I think we had just taken a sack on the play before to kind of take us out of field position. And somebody made a point on Twitter I thought was really astute. In the past, that would have been a situation where with Pete Carroll in charge, they would have gotten real conservative. Let's not get crazy here. Let's not take any chances. And yet Waldron dials up the long ball and Russ puts it right on the money. The first touchdown to Lockett was a thing of beauty. Great route, beautiful route. But what I liked the best, and my favorite play of the game, was a touchdown to Gerald Everett. Came with Waldron in a sense, essentially package deal from the Rams. We only saw him a couple of times. But when we did, you could see how they want to use him. There was a play in the second half, before I talk about the touchdown, that got nullified by a penalty, and it's a shame. It was just an illegal formation. The left tackle wasn't covered up. And it was a little screen pass to Everett. And you see for a tight end how athletic he is and that they intend to use him that way. There was another one. There was another play that was intended for him. It was a screen design where Russ kind of got mixed up, had some pressure, tried to get the ball to him, threw it into the turf, and he had a look on his face afterwards like, man, we missed an opportunity there. So you can see some of the creative things they're going to do with Gerald Everett. I think he could be in for a big year. But the touchdown pass was a result of a play design that I'm no X's and O's guru, but I don't think we've seen route combinations like this before. It was out of a trips formation, and they had Lockett run instead of like what Bevel and Schottenheimer do is just run guys off, try to lure the defenders that way. But they'd be lazy little runoffs, like just run a flag that way, run a post that way, and we'll drag a guy underneath. But they had Lockett kind of do a little change of direction, stop and start combo route, which really caused hesitation on the part of the DB and allowed Everett to just cut across. DK was on that side as well, I believe, drawing some attention from the secondary, and caught it in stride, ran in for the touchdown. Again, showed his athleticism and his burst. That was really exciting. So I don't think, there were some times in the second half when things kind of stalled. Part of that, the Seahawks started rotating their centers. Fuller played most of the first half, and then they gave Posick a series in the second quarter. And then Posick got quite a bit more run in the second half, it appeared. Then he got banged up a little bit. I think Fuller had to come back in. Neither fared all that well. Posick in particular got abused on a DeForest Buckner sack. DeForest Buckner abuses a lot of guys, but it just looked like Posick wasn't comfortable on the play. That's going to be an issue. And I think it's something to look forward to as we move ahead with this offensive line, because by all indications, without watching the game again, Dwayne Brown with 1 week of practice seemed to hold up well. Right side looked good. Carson had running lanes. Russ had some pressure, took a couple of sacks, but I think he had pretty consistent time to throw the football and to operate. So my first impressions of the offensive line performance, they were pretty good. That center position is going to be an issue. And I just wonder how legitimate of a shot Dakota Shepley has to be the long-term starting center on this squad. They got him off waivers from the 49ers. He's a guy that played some tackle and guard, but was converted to center this offseason, I believe, with the Niners. Had something like 90 snaps in the preseason at center. I don't think gave up a single pass pressure, had a really great Pro Football Focus pass blocking grade. You see some little bits of tape of him, really physical. He can maul too. He's an interesting story too, young guy. So I think the Seahawks think they might have something there. Only been in the building for 2 weeks, but I would imagine, I'm just going to go out on a limb and predict that we're going to hear some Pete Carroll speak this week about how Dakota Shepley is going to be battling. He's going to be competing. He's going to be in there battling for that job and might get some opportunities. Let's talk about the defense, shall we? Colts had a long drive early on where they piecemealed a drive together, a couple of third down conversions, and really it would have been a 3 and out if not for Jamal Adams just mistiming a blitz by a half step to get in on a sack of Wentz. And there was a lot of moaning on Twitter, and our good friend Eric Briggs was texting me some anti-Ken Norton Jr. speak about personnel use and play calls, and some of that might be true. There were some times where, you know, Carlos Dunlap and Rasheen Green dropping into coverage probably isn't ideal. You want to minimize those play calls. But I thought there were some real positives to take away from the game too. First of all, we saw right away that Jamal Adams is still going to be a playmaker, running around the field. They didn't blitz him as much. They don't have to now. We'll talk about why in a second. But kind of like I had anticipated when we talked a couple of days ago, that a lot of moving him around, a lot of decoy, a lot of faking blitzes, you know, bouncing around trying to get the Colts to figure out where he's going to be. But we saw some of that elite run defense from him as well, shooting gaps and running guys down, and that burst and that speed. He looked healthy, certainly. Quandre Diggs was all over the field as well, hitting guys, flying around, going sideline to sideline. DJ Reed got burned a couple of times. I don't know about burned. There were a couple of plays that were completed his way where he wasn't quite in position to make the play. One was on what looked like a blown coverage, though, miscommunication. But he was in position a couple other times, made some nice plays. Trey Flowers, for the most part, people seem to think he played an okay game. The last touchdown, which after the Seahawks had the game wrapped up, I watched him, focused on him the whole time because he came up. Was it Zach Pascal that caught the last touchdown? He came up at the last second to play bump and run and get physical and get a push on Pascal, and then he just gave up inside leverage and let him run inside him to the post for an easy touchdown. It was a bad look for him. He was on an island, sure, but they were good enough. Even though Carson Wentz got off to a great start, I think he was 9 out of his first 10, 90-something yards and a touchdown. We saw some of the flashes today of what people like so much about Wentz when he's right. But then we also in the second half kind of saw the Carson Wentz that is now 0-6 against the Seahawks and that we know so well because the pass rush and the defensive line started to wear him down. And that's what I want to talk about. The defensive line today is key to the football game, I think. You talk about the offense, but that defensive line, they held up okay in the first half. Jonathan Taylor was getting some yards on the ground. What did Taylor end up with? 17 carries, 56 yards. For a guy that was averaging over 100 yards a game last year in the second half, a guy that finished third in the NFL last year in rushing yardage, they really held him under wraps. But in the second half, you could start to see them really dominate that Colts offensive line. They just flat out dominated them. A line that, other than Julian Davenport at left tackle playing for Eric Fisher, who they're trying to get healthy, Quentin Nelson played the whole game, by the way. We weren't sure he would. And then there are Ryan Kelly, Mark Lewinsky, Braden Smith just signed the huge extension, one of the highest paid tackles in the NFL now on the right side. And as the game wore on, Seahawks defensive line imposed their will. In the run game, I thought Brian Monet had some flashes. He looks like a guy that could take a step forward, especially Poona Ford got shaken up at one point. Looked like it might have been a stinger. It will be interesting to see in the post-game stuff what happened with some of the injuries. D. Eskridge also looks like he got concussed. But Monet really, really disrupted things at times. Al Woods looked refreshed after a year off. But the most exciting thing was seeing that group of defensive ends that we were so excited about, because they actually devoted their time and resources this offseason to building a rotation at that position after 4 or 5 seasons of being too thin there. They were so stacked today that LJ Collier was a healthy scratch, and that's a storyline we're going to have to read moving forward. We're going to have to look at, especially if they go and sign Geno Atkins, who's a true 3 technique, and Collier's essentially been converted to that now. He might be the odd man out. But we saw Carlos Dunlap being Carlos Dunlap, just dominating at times, beating the heck out of Julian Davenport, being physical, being disruptive in the run game and the pass game. We saw the same out of Benson Mayo. He had a sack today, also abused Davenport. I thought he looked great. Kerry Hyder didn't get his name called a lot, but there were a lot of plays where he was an accomplice. He was nearby. He was taking on blockers. Liked what I saw from Poona before he went out. But the most exciting thing, we didn't really see much out of Alton Robinson. I'll have to see his snap count. Didn't hear his name called at all. Rasheen Green looks like a guy that going into training camp, we all thought he was going to have a hard time making the roster. And he might have been the best defensive lineman on the field for the Seahawks today. Pursuing, playing the run, playing the pass, or rushing the passer. And then Daryl Taylor. Daryl Taylor made some plays in the running game, showed that he's not a one-trick pony. Coming out of Tennessee, what we liked the most about him was his burst, his athleticism, his ability to get around the edge and bend and turn. And then he had the broken leg. And he had the rod inserted. And there were all those reports at the end of last season that he just wasn't mentally right, that he just wasn't confident in that leg. And then he was the star of training camp. But as I said at the top of this one, so many times those stories don't carry over into the regular season. But Daryl Taylor might have had the biggest play of the game. And it was late when the Colts were still in it before the Seahawks' last touchdown, where he had a sack of Carson Wentz. I think it was a 3rd down sack. I think it finished off a drive where he won with power. He won with, we hear it all the time, speed to power. Coming off the left side. We also saw him play the right and the left-hand side. For a young guy in that defense, you don't see that very often. Michael Bennett used to do that. Don't see that very often. That's huge for him to be able to do that. He's playing on the left side. He's just a straight-up speed bull rush on Braden Smith, who I mentioned, one of the better tackles in the AFC, just got paid. And Taylor knocked him off his feet. Blew him off his feet. Had Braden falling backwards and got to Carson Wentz for the sack. Big sack and a big moment. Great to see that kid make a play like that. Jordan Brooks really didn't make any eye-popping plays, but he was around the football a lot. Bobby Wagner looked fine, even after having the little knee refresher that he had last week or 2 weeks ago that he does at the beginning of every season. He looked fine. It didn't look like a defense that was missing KJ Wright because Daryl Taylor and Jordan Brooks look so good. that defensive line gives that defense a chance to be good enough to impact games. And if we can continue to see consistency now from what we saw today on offense, good enough to allow the Seahawks to play with anyone. It'll be interesting to see what happens now next week. Let's pull up some scores here. There were a lot of upsets today around the league, and I wonder if this is going to be something that maybe we'll see a little more of because teams aren't playing guys in the preseason. So lack of familiarity, maybe some rust, although we saw some good performances today. And it looks like they switched away from this game. It looks like that Minnesota-Cincinnati game is going to end in a tie. But it looked like Cincinnati was going to upset Minnesota. But the other eye-popping ones, Houston, I don't know if you can say that's an upset, but Houston scoring 37 points with no Deshaun Watson and all the trouble they had and all the issues with that roster. They beat Jacksonville 37-21 in the debut of Urban Meyer as an NFL head coach. But when you look around what happened in the NFC West today, it's a damn good thing that the Seahawks looked as good as they did and beat a quality opponent on the road and went to 1-0. Arizona, absolutely. Well, first of all, San Francisco beat Detroit 41-33. We saw a little bit of Trey Lance in that game, so that'll be interesting to watch moving forward. But Arizona, Tennessee, on the road, went to Tennessee and beat them 38-13. I don't think Derrick Henry was even a factor in this game. Chandler Jones had 4 sacks. I think he had 3 of them in the first quarter.
History says.
See, that's why I don't like. Screw you, NFL Network. I don't want to hear your ad. And Kyler Murray looked good. Had 4 touchdown passes, spread the ball around to a bunch of different receivers. So I put it out on Twitter. Check out my feed and answer the survey because it'll be interesting to see. Seahawks come home for their home opener next week. First time with fans in the stands in 2 seasons. That's going to be exciting. Tennessee was supposed to be one of the favorites in the AFC this year. Maybe the loss of Arthur Smith, their offensive coordinator, going to Atlanta to be the head coach was bigger than some of us thought. But to lose at home to an Arizona team that talented, but still a lot of question marks about. Are we as Seahawks fans now, what's your reaction to that? Oh, crap, the Cardinals might really actually be good this year? Because you've heard me say it. I'm not a huge believer in Cliff Kingsbury long-term overall as head coach. Not a huge believer in Kyler Murray. I think some of those reports we hear out of the Arizona area about him not being 100% committed, not being a great leader or a great teammate, might be true. He's a talented dude. Don't get me wrong. But is your reaction to that score, oh, crap, the Cardinals are good, now the NFC West is even more of a gauntlet? Or is it, hey, maybe the home opener isn't as tough as we thought it was going to be, right? Julio Jones and Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown and that offense. Maybe their defense isn't that good. And it does give you a little bit of a different idea heading into that game. And then seeing the Vikings struggle to pull out a tie with Cincinnati. I think it ended up as a tie. There were 6 seconds left when I mentioned it earlier. And this is why we talk about it's always fun. When the schedule comes out, it's fun. It's fun to conjecture, right? And I used to do it when I wrote for 12th Man Rising and Seahawk Maven. Every time the schedule comes out, we'd all do our little, here's a 16 guy. I've done it on this podcast, right? A win-by-win projection. It's trickier now than ever because we don't get any clues in the preseason. And the schedule comes out right after the draft. And so we haven't seen training camp. We haven't seen all the free agent signings or trades that have made. It's so hard to try and figure out year in, year out who's going to be good because sometimes it's less about the names on a roster and more about just how things click. I in fantasy football this year, I took Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook, and I didn't mind taking 2 guys from the same offense because I thought they have continuity. They have that same group of skill position players. The quarterback's been there 5 years now. Continuity, even though the offensive coordinator's a different person. It's Gary Kubiak's son. He worked under him. It's going to be the same system, terminology, and everything else. I thought, continuity, here we go. And then look, they struggle in their opening game against a team that most people were willing to write off in the Cincinnati Bengals. You just can never tell. And so you look at that schedule and you go, geez, Colts, Titans, Vikings. Maybe not. Maybe the Seahawks now have an opportunity to go 3-0 before they get to those back-to-back games against NFC West teams. But regardless, this division is going to be a heavyweight fight all season long. It's a shame that they kind of got away from their scheduling habits of the last few years in the NFL, and where they would stack all the division games at the end. The Seahawks' last 2 home games are against the Bears and Lions, and maybe we'll be thankful for that at the time. And then they finish up at Arizona in Week 17. But man, that would be some great drama down the stretch. It's going to be wild, and I think this division, to some extent, is going to beat itself up or beat each other up. I don't think anyone's going to go 6-0 in the division. That would shock me. I think. In fact, I'll go so far as to predict that it's more likely that every team in the division will go 1-1 against each other. We'll have to see how that plays out. But those are my thoughts today. You cannot look at this game in any way other than great debut for Shane Waldron. After all the offseason drama and question marks about Russell Wilson, couldn't have asked for a better debut from him. Seahawks play a quality opponent on the road and win to go 1-0. They get to come home next week and play the Tennessee Titans at home in front of a packed stadium. And I hope, I'll talk about this again later this week as we kind of break down the Titans and look closer at that game. I hope that I'm right about this. But I feel like that stadium packed full of people that had the experience of going to games taken away from them for a year will be more energized, more appreciative, more enthusiastic and energetic than ever next week. And we'll feel it, see it and feel it, and the Seahawks will feel it on the field. Because I get some heat for saying this, but I am 100% in agreement on the side of the argument that Lumen Field, as it's now called, is not as tough a place to play as it used to be because the crowd's gotten complacent. A lot of people that are from out of town, that have moved here for the economy, that didn't grow up Seahawk fans, that don't have that deep emotional attachment. But also it's people that have been going to games for 40 years that have gotten complacent. I moved out of a section a few years ago. I used to sit on the 50-yard line, 300 level. They were great seats. It was maybe the best view in the stadium. I moved out of that section because the people around me had all been there since day one, and they got complacent. And they were lazy. And they would get upset with you for standing at the games. So I had to get out of there. Hopefully we won't see a lot of that, and the energy on Sunday will be unbelievable. I think there's rain in the forecast. With this weird schedule where we're on the road a lot, we might not get a lot of sunny, nice Seahawk game days today, but that's okay with me. So anyway, those, let's see, what are we going to do here? Let's just go with this one. I like this one to end on. Those are my quick thoughts. I'll try to do this when I can, even next week. Next week, going to the game. I'll shoot back here and give you my thoughts on the experience in the stadium and what I thought of the game from there too. Join me on these, okay? You can, wherever you're watching, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, Emerald City Sportscast, if you're watching on Periscope through Twitter, if you're watching on the Facebook page, you can comment, and those comments all get filtered back to the platform that I use to do this live stream. So you can ask me questions, give me your comments, your thoughts on what you thought of the game. Lot of fun. Can't wait to see Pete Carroll's post-game press conference, the comments, see Shane Waldron's comments, watch this Green Bay, New Orleans game behind me, watch the Rams play, see what they look like tonight with Matthew Stafford under center, see if the NFC West can go 4-0 to start out. So have a wonderful Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and stay tuned. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and wherever you listen to this program or on the YouTube channel, because we'll hit you back later in the week to talk Seahawks, Titans. I'm going to go watch the Mariner game now as well. Tyler Gilbert against Logan Gilbert. I still haven't told you my Tyler Gilbert story. I'll do that in the full episode later this week. Pretty funny conversation I had with him at work earlier this week. Let's just say this. No spoiler alert here. He'd had a few cocktails. Just saying. But the Mariners in the wild card race dropped one last night, failed to gain ground. They're 2 games out of the wild card with Boston coming in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm going to the game tomorrow. If any of you are, hit me up. Let me know. I'll be in the pen. Let's talk some baseball and have some beers, okay? I'll see you in a few days. Thanks for listening. I'm Dan Viennes. And remember, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're always right.